Welcome to Native Bidaské, Native News Online's weekly spotlight on the people making news and leading change in Indian country.
Welcome to another episode of Native Bidaské. I'm Levi Rickert, publisher and editor of Native News Online. And today we're going to actually have a different format because we're going to bring in our sister publication, associate publisher, editor, friend, business partner, Brian Edwards from Tribal Business News. And we're going to talk about the Great Lakes Tribal Economic Summit. It's going to take place on September 19th and 20th. That's about a week and a half away now. And it will be at the Four Winds Casino in New Buffalo, Michigan, the first exit into Michigan off of I-94 if you're coming in from Chicago. And so we would like to tell you about our summit and invite you to come. So Brian, welcome to Native Bidaské. First time ever, man.
Hey, Levi, such a pleasure.
Hey, tell us why are we doing this summit?
Well, I think, as we found, you and I with Tribal Business News when we started it, there's a gap in the marketplace. There's not a lot of places for tribal economic development people and tribal leaders to get together. And this is an opportunity for them really to get together, to share kind of best practices, to talk about the things that they're working on. So this is not RES, the big annual conference that happens once a week. This is a regional approach to it, where we are gathering tribes from Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa to come together for the Great Lakes region.
Yes, and Brian, tell us how many participants, attendees do you expect to attract?
Well, somewhere between 150 and 200 people. And really, it's not just about the number, it's about the people that are in the room that can benefit from being together and sharing ideas and networking.
And we have a very special guest today who is a friend of ours. She is Tanya Gibbs, who is a partner at Rosette Law right here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Welcome, Tanya.
Miigwech, happy to be here.
Yes, and you wear several hats. At the summit, you'll even wear a couple hats. I mean, you are an attorney, you are a head of an EDC, and just kind of tell us who you are real quickly.
Sure. Well, I'm a descendant of the Little Traverse Bay Bands of Odawa Indians. And as a partner at Rosette, my law practice focuses on non-gaming economic development. So I represent a lot of tribes, both here in Michigan and across the country, even into Canada. And in my non-lawyer life, I also sit as the president of my tribe's economic development arm. And also I sit on the board for Ho-Chunk Nation Section 17 Corporation, 12 Clans, Inc.
And Tanya, as an attorney, wearing that hat, you actually observe a whole lot of activity among the tribes here in the Great Lakes region. So there's a lot going on in Great Lakes states in terms of non-gaming economic development by the region's 36 federally recognized tribes. Look at the gaming economic development success of Shakopee, Mill Locks in Minnesota, Forest County over in Potawatomi in Wisconsin, and even here in Michigan, like the Gun Lake tribe. There's so many innovative things happening, but the Great Lakes seems to be overlooked sometimes when you look at the big scheme of things within Indian country. It's almost like it's a flyover state, region even. Do you agree with that assessment, or why and why not?
Yeah, I think I do, but I'm not real sure what the reason is for it. I think part of it is, for whatever reason, there's a lot of focus on sort of the Southwest tribes and Oklahoma tribes. And I think sometimes, the big gaming tribes that we think of, like Seminole, and their Hard Rock brand and things like that. And, not to say that there aren't large gaming tribes here in the Midwest. Certainly Shakopee is one of them, Gun Lake is one of them, Nottawasepi, others. But for whatever reason, it does seem like we don't get the same type of attention. Part of it might be that some tribes, at least here in Michigan, they were, reaffirmed or federally recognized, in the 90s or early 2000s. So maybe that's part of it. some of the sort of quote unquote older tribes, although we know we've all been here since time immemorial, but some of the old 1934 type constitution, those tribes, they're a lot of them are smaller and in more geographically isolated areas like northern Minnesota, Wisconsin, Upper Peninsula, Michigan. And so, maybe just because they're smaller and they don't have a big impact in gaming, maybe that's part of it. Hard to say.
Yeah, but it's that's why I think it's really good that Tribal Business News is putting the emphasis on. And Brian, would you agree? And then you'll have the next question to Tanya.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Great Lakes states are a little less recognized for the work they're doing. But when you look around, there's actually a lot of innovation in all kinds of areas of non-gaming economic development, whether it be federal contracting, whether it be some of the emerging areas and opportunities that we'll be talking about at the summit. And one of the topics, we're going to talk about as well, and Tanya, you'll be a part of that, is land development and real estate development for tribes. So we're not talking about building casinos or public assistance type of housing, talking more kind of about kind of a private equity type approach to commercial development or mixed use development. So how much of an untapped opportunity is that for tribes in the Great Lakes region?
Yeah, good question. I think there's a huge opportunity there. There's all kinds of real estate development activities and opportunities both on and off reservation. I think a lot of folks, my tribe, for example, we've been working on our, redeveloping our old casino site for the last 15 years or so. Some tribes are just starting into that process, and other tribes have been doing, off reservation real estate development, for a long time. So I think those are really exciting projects in Indian country, and certainly some of my favorite to work on, primarily because I think your tribal community and your local community too, tribal or not, really see the benefit from that. It's a direct input or direct impact. It's fun to see shovels in the ground. It's fun to see buildings go up, and then it's really exciting, I think, to see both your tribal members and the local community come in and use those buildings, whether that's a restaurant or a hotel or an apartment complex or, whatever.
I do think too, I've said this to you before, it's different driving into the town of Bidaské now than it used to be, right? Because as you kind of get to the edge of town, there's no longer vacant lots. There's Victory Squares, which is your project, which you've been working on for a decade, plus or minus?
More than that, but yes.
And this is no small development. There's a Marriott, there's a Starbucks, there's a variety of different commercial buildings on it. I know you're doing housing as well nearby. So also on the panel, Eugene Magnuson from Little River Band is going to be talking about, they're basically redeveloping downtown Manistee. And these are projects that are tens of millions of dollars to put these projects together. So I mentioned housing. So I know during the panel, we'll talk about housing as really an economic development tool, not really the public assistance. Your tribe is one of the first tribal LIHTC projects in the state of Michigan. Tell us about that project and why more tribes are starting to take a look at the approach that you're taking.
Sure. Well, so housing has always been a big need in the Bidaské area and Emmett County generally. The local community, the tribe has always recognized that. And if you Google it, you can see countless articles talking about the massive need for housing in the area. It really didn't come to, I think, our attention until after we built the first phase, which included about 7.5 acres and was the Marriott, a couple of restaurants, a Starbucks, et cetera. And, that employs upwards of 150 people. And there's no place for 150 people to live in Bidaské. And so we found that a lot of folks were driving from really far away, and we had anticipated always putting sort of market rate housing up on the property. But, realistically, the housing market in Bidaské is not affordable unless you're quite wealthy. And so for someone to come work at Starbucks or, be a barista or work the front desk at the hotel, those folks can't always afford the housing that's available in the area. So it really made sense for us to really focus on, what we're calling workforce housing, and using the low-income housing tax credit program to be able to do so, which we found is, not the easiest program to navigate. So we've been picking up business partners, including folks from Oneida Nation and their real estate development arm, 1822 Land and Development, to help us as they're working on some of their own LIHTC projects across the lake.
Well, Tanya, and I jokingly say to people that anyone who's ever played Monopoly knows he with the most property wins, right? Or he or she. So it's really exciting to see that the tribes are entered into the real estate. And you mentioned working with the Oneida tribe with your EDC. Tell us, there's kind of a myth out there that tribes just cannot get along with each other. I'm actually told that often, and I'm going, no, what are you talking about? That may have been true years and years ago, but speak to that too, because I know that you have as we said earlier, you wear several hats, so you're a good observer. I know that. So, what's your observation about tribes working together these days?
Well, I think we do it all the time, and I think we've been doing it forever. And for whatever reason, I think folks just like to focus on the negative, and certainly not all, relationships always go as planned. But, primarily, there's lots of really good ways to work together in Indian country and ways to support each other. I think as a whole, our law firm has always really promoted and wanted our clients to work together on different topics. For a good example is on the non-business side, but we've got groups like the United Tribes of Michigan, groups like MAST, where those, on the government side are coming together to pursue and advocate for their similar interests, right? And so I think the business side is no different. And in fact, the business side in a lot of ways might be easier because you're dealing with business folks and, your interest is to pursue economic development, to make money for your tribe, to create jobs for your tribe, to build wealth for your tribe. Maybe generate tax revenue, all those different things. And, so if you're able to find another tribal business that has similar goals and sort of a similar business philosophy and culture, it makes sense, to work together. And not only that, but then you're keeping more money within Indian country instead of finding outside partners, and you're helping two nations, two communities, like our partnership with Oneida, that's really cool. We have a history of working together from when Little Traverse first got reaffirmed in '94. And so building this relationship with Oneida, more than 20 years later is pretty special, I think.
It really is. And I know you had your hand wearing your legal hat with the coming together of two tribes and tribal entities to purchase one of the largest buildings in downtown Grand Rapids.
Yep.
When I was a child, I grew up here, it was the largest building. And so it kind of always excites me when I drive through the S-curve of downtown Grand Rapids on the freeway and look over and see the McKay Tower owned by two Potawatomi tribes. Talk about that. Did that arrangement work? Is it working out well, or talk about that?
Yeah, I think that was a really exciting opportunity. Gun Lake sort of found the opportunity to purchase the building and said, why not partner with the sister EDC, and both, GLI and Wasaya Beck have their offices downtown Grand Rapids. And I think there's some shared history historically. So it was important to both tribes. And, from the legal perspective, I think it was really important for us just to, draft documents that made sense and, allowed for each of the parties to understand each other, sort of, define the rules and how we're all going to work together. An important thing was how we created the management structure, and there's a third independent board member. They don't get to vote on everything, but, it's nice to have some of that expertise to weigh in as well. And so, I think from the legal perspective, I think your governing documents are always super important in that regards.
Yeah, thank you. Brian, you get the next question.
That's a great example of tribes collaborating, kind of, and I know that's something you've been working on as well, not just with those two tribes, but with other tribes. Kind of talk a little bit about cross-border kind of collaboration and how that's growing in Indian country.
Sure. Well, part of it has been we've seen it with a lot of folks, but primarily started with Potawatomi Nation, spanning all the way from Canada, all the way down through the U.S. And they're just a really strong group that has been getting together more frequently, both I think on the government side as well as on the business side, to really talk about how do they work together, how do they and do business together, and how do they help one another. I think there's a real recognition among the tribes that some of them, are in different spots. Some of them are fairly wealthy gaming tribes, others are not. And so having some real discussions about, what's the need financially? Is there, corporate governance help that we can do? Is there collaboration that we can do? How do we help our sister tribes across the border? So there's been a lot of really exciting conversation that way. And I think, that's sort of at least the first one that came to my attention. Since then, I've seen also a lot of non-Potawatomi nations in Canada say, hey, we have, we've got lineage, we've got history, we have relationships here in Michigan with some of the Upper Peninsula tribes, or we've got relationships in Wisconsin. And, how do we get together? I think, depending on where land sits, there's some unique, sovereign specific opportunities that might be available, like, free trade zones kind of things that might impact tax and trade. But generally, I think there's all kinds of opportunity, for either tribe to work on either side of the border, just depending on where their goals, are and what their focus is.
I mean, I've been collaborating with the Potawatomi man for the past 4 years at Tribal Business News and Native News Online. It's working pretty good.
Yeah.
They're good to work with.
Yeah, I'm older now, and in my lifetime, I've seen such tremendous change, and the idea that the tribes working together, I sit back with a big smile on my face, because, as I said, I do get that question often. I hear that tribes can't get along with each other, and I think what I like about it is now that there's a track record on some of these tribes, that they know what worked and what did not work. And so I think that the idea, and it's one of the things in journalism we try to do, Brian and I both, is always ask that question, tell us something that didn't work, because people always want to tell what they're doing is so successful, but help the younger people know what didn't work and why you should stay away from it. And I think that I just love the idea of tribes working together on that. And Tanya, as far as the summit goes, there's going to be a lot of opportunities for tribes and tribal enterprises present for the economies in Michigan, Wisconsin, Minnesota. Is there money to be made for non-native companies that learn to work with tribes, tribal enterprises, indigenous entrepreneurs?
Absolutely. All kinds of it. I think the biggest thing that I experience in all the hats that I wear is, there's a need to access more capital. And for a variety of reasons, right? And in a variety of circumstances and different types of projects. And in a lot of cases, there's capital that might be available in Indian country, whether that's through your own tribe, right? Maybe you're a successful gaming tribe and the council decides that they'll take gaming revenue and invest in their economic, non-gaming economic arm. Tribes like Shakopee have really awesome grant opportunities that they provide to other tribes, which is nice. But in a lot of situations, we just need traditional bank financing, whether that's to build a building or acquire a company or do whatever. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Unfortunately, I think some of the traditional banks and financial institutions don't necessarily understand how to do business in Indian country, and generally are a little bit scared to do so. or have some apprehensions, maybe some misunderstandings about who we are or how we operate. So I spend a lot of my time educating those folks on, what corporate governance looks like in Indian country, and, why we're not scary, and kind of this is how it works. And so, sometimes it's more difficult to deal with some folks than others, but I think for those institutions and businesses and companies that really want to genuinely learn about Indian country and be a good partner, not just we're going to give you a loan for 20 million to go build X, but really come and say, we want to build a relationship with you and we want to be a long-term partner. Sure, we'll give you a couple $1,000,000 to go build X, but we also want to help you with Y, and we want to, provide other services to the community or whatever. I think in Indian country, it's really about relationship building, and to the extent that folks want to come here, want to build a relationship that's mutually beneficial, then there is tons of opportunities to make money.
You cannot be transactional in Indian country.
No.
You can try, it's just not going to last. That's what I have certainly learned.
Give you a one-off, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and many of my clients have learned the hard way. So yes.
Well, I
all
think
that
Brian,
educating that you do are those billable hours, or probably not, huh?
Well, it depends on the situation, but yeah, it's education, and it's education on both sides. It's education trying to get the non-native group to understand what it's like to do business in Indian country, but on the tribal side, working with our clients, it's important for them to make sure that they're doing proper diligence, and diligence isn't just background checks and let's look at who owns this company and where their interests lie, but also like, do their goals and corporate philosophies align with yours and align with the tribes, and how are you guys going to work together, and having some of those discussions to make sure that they're going to be a good business partner.
Yeah, and Brian, question for you, and you and I were conceptualized the whole notion of having this economic summit, but isn't that really what it's all about? Is bringing people together? Tell us about the type of people that will be in the room.
People like Tanya, thankfully,
Expert.
Wearing all of her hats, but tribal economic development people, either that work with the tribe or for a tribal economic development corporation, tribal leaders, there'll be bankers and lawyers and the other kinds of folks that you tend to get at these conferences, both folks that work within Indian country and some that are looking to learn and work on that relationship building piece as well. So we really do have a great series of folks that are going to come in and speak on different topics. Federal contracting, which is a growing and important part of the non-gaming economy in Indian country. We're going to have folks from the Center for Indian Country Development, which is part of the Federal Reserve Bank in Minneapolis, talking about federal contracting in the Great Lakes region based on research and analysis that they've done. Really interesting story about a tribe in northern Minnesota that did the largest land back transaction in history for a tribe. They bought 28,000 acres last year. And it's a really great story, not just because it's big, but because what they're going to actually be doing with those 28,000 acres to create economic development opportunities for their tribes. So there's going to be kind of a range of different topics that we talk about. A lot of real estate and land development, as we talked about. Federal contracting will be a part of it. I think another thing, and it's something that I know we'll be discussing, is when it comes to contracting, we maybe don't need to call it just federal contracting for Native Americans. Maybe we should call it native contracting, because there's an increasing amount of opportunity in the corporate sector. And we will certainly be talking about that. We've got some news that we're going to be announcing at the summit. So it's all I can say for right now. Can't give you any more details, Levi.
And Tanya, why are you excited about this summit?
Well, I think it'll just be a really, great opportunity for everyone to share their thoughts and ideas. I'm excited that it's focused on a couple of, kind of hot topic areas where we'll be able to see kind of folks at different stages of development and really learn, rather than kind of having topics and things all over the place. I'm excited to have that focus, and I think people are excited about that. I also have a number of clients there and some of their non-native business partners as well. So I think it'll be a really good group.
And again, we have been talking about the Great Lakes Tribal Economic Summit that's going to take place Tuesday, September 19th, and all day on September 20th, the following day, and Wednesday at the Four Winds Casino Resort in New Buffalo, Michigan. So there's still time to attend. So we'll have something up here on the screen that will show you how you can register for the Great Lakes Tribal Economic Summit. Brian, you have the last word. What do you want to say?
Thank you for having me on, Levi. And more importantly, thank you for having Tanya on. She's the superstar here.
Well, this has been fun, and we're going to do it again because I think that there is an appetite for learning more about business in Indian country. So we'll do it again.
Sounds good.
And to our guests, thank you so much, Chi Miigwech, for tuning in to another episode of Native Bidaské. We'll be back next week with another episode. And in the meantime, be safe. Back to school time, kids. Study hard. Make your parents proud. Chi Miigwech.
If you appreciate what we do here at Native News Online, we invite you to donate to support our continued work covering Indian country. You can scan this code with your smartphone or go to the link located below this video to donate today. We greatly appreciate your support. Please be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And be sure to scan this code or go to the link below to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you for joining us today, and please be sure to join us again next week for another episode of Native Bidaské. Chi Miigwech.